Okay, so I'm going to say something that I know some of y'all need to hear. How someone disagrees with you speaks volumes about how they feel about you. Not just about how they feel about you, but about the relationship in general. And a lot of us focus on how well things are going when it's good. Chemistry, laughs, flow, but that's not always where the truth lives. Sometimes the truth in how you're treated when someone's mad tells you everything you need to know, because conflict doesn't destroy relationships, it reveals them. And that's what we're getting into today. So here's the overview. We're not just talking about arguing. We're talking about tone, timing, tactics, how someone shows up when they're mad, how they handle vulnerability when you're not on the same page. So we're going to be talking about why conflict is often the real mirror, what to pay attention to when someone's upset with you, why I didn't mean it doesn't undo what's already been done. We're going to talk a little bit about stonewalling and also what it means to set your standard for disagreements early. So let's get into it. Okay, so a lot of us think that conflict is a red flag, but it doesn't always mean that something's wrong. The way we handle conflict, though, matters because anyone can be sweet when they're getting what they want. But what about how they treat you when they're not getting what they want? That's the real question, because when emotions are high, that's when the baseline shows up. Not the best, but the baseline. Because when emotions are high, we often regress into default behaviors. It's what they've actually practiced, how they really hold power, frustration, disappointment. And that tells you who you're really dealing with. So here's what to notice. I'm going to give you 3 questions that I want you to sit with. Press pause if you need to. The first question, do they go silent for days and call it space? Do they bring up things you told them in confidence and throw it back at you when they're mad? Do they say things that cut you and then later walk it back with, I didn't mean it, I was just upset? So let me say this and know that I'm saying this with love. If it came out their mouth, it was already in there. Anger does not invent new things. It just unlocks old stuff. It's like money. Money isn't the root of all evil. It just reveals more of what you are, more of who you are. So who you are when you are penniless is just amplified when you have cash. So if you're stingy when you don't have nothing, you're going to be stingy when you have a lot. And if you're generous when you got only 2 nickels to rub together, you will just be more generous when financial abundance reigns on you. The same is true for anger. We become a lot more of who we are when we're mad. But here's the thing, just like in a courtroom, once the jury hears something, they can't unhear it. You can strike it from the record. That just means that the transcriber isn't recording that part, but the jury heard it. And the same thing is true for you when someone's mad. The words land, the tone registers, and the impact stays. And sometimes people try to strike it from the record. They do, they really do. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I was just mad. You know I love you, girl. But the seed has already been planted. And that doesn't mean that the relationship is doomed, but it does mean that you've seen something important. Remember, everything is data. Everything is data. And your job is not to pretend that you didn't hear what you heard or know what you know. Now let's talk about silence, because sometimes people don't yell. Some people don't explode. Some people just disappear. They go no contact, no communication. They don't show up. They don't respond to text. They just go radio silent. Or sometimes it's not that extreme. Sometimes they just give you the one word answers, the curt responses. You ask them how they're doing. Fine. What you want for dinner? I don't know. So sometimes it looks like that. And then when they return, sometimes they just pretend like nothing happened. But when people do that, that's not space. That's a power move. That's just control disguised as a cooling off period. There's a difference between taking time to self-regulate and withholding connection as a form of punishment. So if you've ever been in that space where somebody just goes silent, and you know how loud it is, silence is not always silent. You might start apologizing even though you didn't do anything wrong. You just want them to come back. Or you start trying to manage their emotional state, trying to help them be okay. I've done that so many times. I learned that in my childhood, and one of my longest relationships looked like that. He would go silent for days. I had even went as far as telling him that silence felt abusive to me, and that did not stop him from doing that. But when that happens, suddenly a disagreement that could just be some tension, and all of a sudden now it feels like abandonment. For the record, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but for the record, as an adult, you cannot be abandoned. One of my favorite relationship therapists, Terry Real, says that grown people cannot be, well, Terry doesn't say it like this. I say it like this. Grown people can't be abandoned. They can only be left. But when a familiar pattern is triggered in you, you don't know that. So if you grew up with a parent who weaponized silence like I did, then when someone else goes silent, it makes you feel like you're being abandoned. But that's also when we have to make sure we don't abandon ourselves. But again, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I just wanted to throw that in there because it's important. Back to conflict though. Okay, so the worst kind of conflict isn't about the volume. So it isn't just loud, even if it's silence, which again can be loud. But the worst kind of conflict is when it's cruel. It's when someone reaches into the archives and finds things that you shared with them in trust, and then they throw them back at your face when they're upset. I remember having that done to me when I was about 16, and it was from someone who I really loved, and it hurt more than anything I'd ever felt up till then. But when people do that, they're not trying to repair anything. They're not trying to understand. They're just trying to win, and they're trying to wound. And that's just someone who's bad at conflict, honestly. That's someone who is showing you how they handle tender things. They use tenderness as something to use and not something to protect. And hear me when I say this. You can love someone with your whole heart and still walk away from them simply because of how they handle conflict. Because if they're saying they love you and don't have regard for you, they're just harming you. Oh, I know that's hard. I'm sorry. It's true, though. It's true. Many years ago, I was dating someone, and at the time, we were both non monogamous. I didn't have a primary partner at the time, but he did, and his partner lived out of town. So one weekend, she came to visit, and the next week, when I back together with him and we met for dinner, and I asked him how the weekend was, and he told me they had a fight, and I asked him if it had been resolved, and he said no. And so, the first red flag was I was like, "Oh, you let her go home and y'all was still mad." There was that. But while I was not in their relationship, but his relationship affected our relationship. So I told him, I was like, when we get back to your place, you need to call her and clean this up. You need to repair, right? Because that kind of mess lingers and there's transference. So I knew that if they weren't okay, it was going to spill into our relationship too. And for the record, after dinner, when we got back to his place, he did call her. She didn't answer, but he did call her. At the same time, I also made a mental note about how he handled conflict because we hadn't had a thing yet. We hadn't had a row yet, but we did. And he sulked. He wasn't necessarily a yeller, but he threw tantrums. He would shut down. He would keep talking and saying hurtful things instead of being mindful of his words. So again, I made a note to myself when I saw how he showed up to the conflict with her. And I thought, if he does that to her, he'll do it to me. I never think I'm the exception. I just always assume I'm the rule because that's mostly the case. And sure enough, when we had our first disagreement, he did that thing. He stonewalled me, didn't talk to me, and I reached out to him and asked if he wanted to talk about it. And when he finally did, he wanted to bypass it. And I was like, we're not doing that. The second time we were at a restaurant and I had a migraine and I was having trouble with light sensitivity. And it was a Mexican restaurant and the food was great, but it was Friday night. They had a mariachi band. It was just a lot going on. And so I was overstimulated. And so I was having a hard time hearing and focusing. And I expressed that to him. but he decided that it meant something about him, which wasn't true. In any event, by the time we finished dinner and got to the car, he was mad. And I asked him what was going on because he had stonewalled me through dinner. And then he started kind of having a verbal tantrum. And I was like, but I explained to you what was happening, but he had made it about him. And during the car ride home, and I was driving again, I'm having light sensitivity. So I'm like, okay, we should probably stop talking right now. We should probably put a pin in this because I'm afraid that there are going to be some words said that we can't take back. And he just would not stop. And even once when I was like, okay, I'm going to ask you again, can we please just talk about this later when we both are clear? Instead of going quiet, he started talking to himself like I couldn't hear him. So he was talking to himself about me. It was very strange. Anyways, that was it for me because I knew it was like, I'm not going to wait for 3 strikes because there had already been 2 times and he had already showed me. So I wasn't waiting for the 3rd time because when we got back to his place, he kept going. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm done because he wasn't learning. He was looping. And he was really good at apologizing because he did later, give me a very syrupy apology. But it wasn't repair. It was just routine. And so I let the relationship go because while there were so many wonderful aspects of it, we had a really good time together and he was very kind and generous to me. But again, when he was mad, he was willing to be hurtful, and that was not okay. So if any of this is resonating with you, if you have paid attention to how someone argues with you, if you've wondered if it was a deal breaker, or if you knew in your heart of hearts that it was a deal breaker, but you were just afraid to let it go, let me just offer you this. Start paying attention to the patterns, not the explanations. Pay attention to the impact, not just the intention. Because people love to say, I didn't mean to. Well, it landed. You didn't mean to, but it still happened. You didn't mean to break my toe, but when you stepped on it, it cracked. So intention is important, but impact is sometimes even more important. Circling back to the courtroom metaphor, the difference between first-degree murder and manslaughter is intention, right? Did they premeditate? Did they know that they were going to do this? Or was it, something that just happened? That is the difference between how they get sentenced, how they get charged. It makes a difference in the way the evidence is presented, but it does not change the fact that somebody died. Impact matters. Impact matters. And so I want you to pay attention to that. I want you to set the standard for what you want disagreements to be like before the heat comes. So let me say it plainly. You can say, I'm not asking you not to get upset. I'm asking you not to use things I've shared as ammunition. I need to know that when we disagree, that you won't disappear. I want to be in a relationship where conflict doesn't cost me my dignity. That's what I'm talking about. This doesn't guarantee that it won't happen, but it does guarantee that when it does, you'll see it clearly and you won't be trying to explain it away. As a practice for myself, when I am dating or, getting to know someone, I make it clear my expectations around disagreements. I will tell somebody in a minute, it's great to get along, but how we disagree is very important. I require healthy behaviors in disagreements. Even if that means that when you're mad, you need to take a pause, you can pause. Just tell me that that's what's happening. Don't just walk away. Don't just stonewall me. Say, you know what? I'm feeling a lot of feelings and I'm going to need some time to process and I'm going to take a few days. That's allowed. It's acceptable. In fact, I encourage it. But don't just stonewall me. Please, and don't have tantrums. Talk to me like a grown-up. If we need to take a breath, because sometimes I'm the one who needs to take a breath. If we need to take a breath before we continue, then let's do that. So that when we come back, we're not charged. We can talk about it from a place of mutually trying to understand the other person, right? So, okay, I don't want to keep rambling on. So in closing, I want you to know that it's okay to want to be treated with care, even when they're mad at you. You're also not wrong for remembering what they said. As a side note, if they say something raggedy, and they apologize and you accept the apology, you can't keep bringing it up. That's also an episode for another day. But if they keep doing it, then you got bigger fish to fry anyways. You also don't need to downplay your hurt. If you're hurt, you can express that. Because love is recognizing that how someone holds you when they're mad is just as important as how they hold you when they're in love or when they're feeling loving towards you. Love is measured in the moments where tension rises and respect remains. Again, we're not trying to avoid conflict. We're just refusing to abandon ourselves to get to the other side. If this episode was for you, listen to it again. I hope that it landed with love because that's how I intended it. Oh my God. But if it landed with a bigger thud than I anticipated, I'm sorry. And I hope you receive it because I love you.